Welcome, everyone. I am going to introduce Amanda Browder. So Amanda is a Brooklyn-based artist that produces large-scale fabric installations on buildings. She comes originally from Montana and received her Master of Fine Arts and Master of Arts at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and has taught in the past at Art Institute of Chicago. She's shown nationally and internationally, including, this is a very short list, at galleries and festivals all over the world, including New York, Toronto, Prague, Tokyo, and in museums such as the New Museum, and then of course at UAB, which we'll start off talking about here in just a second. Her published works include Unexpected Art, Chronicle Books, and Strange Materials. She has also received a National Endowment for the Arts grant, which was used to create some of the installation images that we'll see a little bit later, I think. And then she's had photos and reviews have appeared in New York Times, as well as Fibers Magazine, and is the proud founder of the art podcast Bad at Sports, which I think there is an episode that you recorded while you were here in Birmingham.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
I think it was recorded at AEIVA.
Yeah.
If we were ever able to find a space that didn't echo quite as much.
Yeah.
And then, so we're so excited to have you, Amanda. I'm going to turn it over to you to get started and tell us a little bit about your art, and then we'll get to talking about the installation here that you did here at UAB, cool. Magic Chromacity.
So first, I think I'm just going to, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I mean, most of you guys that are here are my friends and family. So hooray to you. So glad that you're here. So I wanted to just put up some photos just because I think it's more exciting to look at imagery than my mug. So I'm going to share my screen, which is a slideshow. Let me see if I'm going to get it going. Bear with me as well, because I'm also, see, that's an email. Don't need to see that. Okay, let's see if we can figure this out. Thank you so much for waiting. Not sure why it's doing this. Okay, so this is in the middle. We should go to part one. Sorry, guys. Technology. I thought I'd be on par. Welcome, Amanda Browder.
Hey.
Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So I can't see myself or anybody else at this point for some reason, so I was like, okay. So I call myself a large-scale fabric installation artist. I like to work really big. And this is something, this is a photo previously that I'm going to talk about in the future. This is the Spectral Locus piece that I did at the, up in Buffalo. It's one of the church. It's like the tall piece, and I'm looking down. You can see myself. But I love to work with the community. So this is a project I did in, what do you call it, in Champaign-Urbana at a school. And I love to work with people, work with donated fabrics, thinking about what happens when you give up a discarded material. You know, instead of just assuming that it's something we put aside, can we start thinking about it as a historic element? You know, can there be history or stories or embedded information, memories within an object, specifically fabric? And then also coming together, the kind of like aspect of getting people together around contemporary art as a celebration for their connectivity, and looking at something beautiful, you know, highlighting an environment that doesn't always get to see beauty and light. A lot of times my favorite part is when the project actually comes down and people are like, oh, that brick at the top, I never noticed that, because it's kind of pulling people into a place where they're interacting with a location that they may have seen over and over, and it's become special based on the project. So one thing I'm just kind of throwing in there in the middle for any art people is that I've always kind of questioned like why people call themselves an artist. This is a project I did during my senior year at Beloit College in undergrad, and I fooled the whole town of Beloit thinking that this famous artist from New York was coming. And I had 2 articles published in the newspaper. This is pre-digital, so this is before fake news. So I built fake news, essentially. And I created this fake guy named David Culentianos. And, you know, I'd never been to New York City, grew up in Montana, and this is also pre-digital, so I had to create this whole character using pre-Photoshop, so it was with a pinhole camera, this kind of thing. And the reason I'm showing you this is that I want people to kind of think about the authority level of artists, how people see and give people freedom when they call themselves or label themselves as an artist. And so that is kind of a big deal to me. It's thinking about, okay, well, what can I do as an artist? Like, what visually can I do to connect with people and to use the visual media to think about their own environment or space? The next thing, like this photo here, this is the neighbor project that was in Chicago, Illinois, when I was living there. And I asked everybody on this certain block to put the word neighbor in their window, kind of thinking about what is physical community? How can we represent it physically versus just this metaphorical thing of like, oh, there's somebody next door from me. As a sidebar story to this piece was that every house, and I think one apartment said it was okay to put this word in, and every condo sent a cease and desist letter saying I was disturbing peace, which is indicative. So I had actually many businesses put this.
Did you install it or?
Yeah. Except for the ones at home. In their homes, they did it themselves. But if it was something that I could just give them, then they did it. So I worked with a lot of businesses too to put up this. And I like the idea that people, when they were walking, these projects, when I work with the fabric installations, are all about like, what's your path from beginning to, say, your home to work and back. A lot of times we kind of lose sight of what's in between. And so I wanted these fabric pieces to just be this awe-inspiring, colorful explosion that really surprises people. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is obviously Magic Chromaticity. This is the project I did in Birmingham at UAB, and in 2014. One of the questions that you guys had sent me, so I'm just going to kind of answer, is like, how did this come about? And so one of them was, this is kind of a side story, but Lauren Lake, who was the director at that time, she actually knew about me on Facebook. And of all the places to kind of get a message from someone saying, hey, do you want to cover our building? Did not expect it to be through social media. But I do find that has actually kind of like exploded over periods of time. Word of mouth, being friends with people, being nice to people. It's a very positive thing. So this project is called Magic Chromaticity. The reason I named it that was that it was the town itself. You guys have like the
Magic City.
Exactly. It's a magic city, and it's also Schloss, the ironworks place. So it's thinking of like chrome as well. So it's like Magic City as well as the chrome. So those kind of elements, and then the Vulcan with the fire. I just thought it was this kind of lighthearted, happy kind of like celebration of the city in itself, because each project that I do is site specific. All the fabric comes from that town, and then we sew it while we're there as well. So each project installation is really site specific to the people, to who's ever living there, the names that they call it. I try to do a little bit of history searching in the beginning just to kind of find out more about the project.
And Amanda, I'll interject for those that aren't familiar with Birmingham. We're called the Magic City because we seemingly popped up overnight during the Industrial Revolution, because we have all three of the key ingredients to work an iron furnace. So limestone, coal, and iron ore is all within just right there next to each other. So it was the kind of perfect conglomeration, and we just boomed almost overnight in the 1800s. So they nicknamed us the Magic City because we grew so fast. And that's why also while we have this massive sculpture of the Roman god Vulcan up on Red Mountain.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that it's interesting, just when I did the site visit for the first time, AEIVA was such a new building. Like, it had just opened. Like the tape was being pulled off essentially when I showed up. And it was, across the street is at the Alice Stevens Center, and that building was so kind of from the 70s. It was a little bit older, but still, like, you had these two cultural icons across from each other, performing arts and the visual arts, right across from each other. And they have been this kind of, it's never been a competition, but they're in the same world, but seen as different. And so I was like, okay, how can we blend those two together? Like, how can we make this kind of virtual stitching between the two to unify them in some way? Because you guys, you're looking at each other. every single day. It's also very hard to photograph both of these. This piece, this was kind of like the best photograph I got, because really the only way to see the work together is to stand there and to have that kind of 360 view. And this time, I think drones cost $1 million just to use. So we didn't have a drone even at that time to get that kind of 360 view virtual thing. So it's going to be a lot of like straight on photographs. But here was the Alice Stevens Center. And you can see I did the panorama, so all the cars are truncated, you know, in the project as well. Let's see. What was the question? Ask me a question.
Yeah. So what? So we kind of covered the influences.
Oh yeah.
And
how about this?
Let's talk a little bit about your process in gathering fabric and such.
Yes, thank you for asking that. So, for people that don't know, essentially what I do is I collect fabric from the certain area. So, specific to this area, it was in the Birmingham, Alabama area. We worked with different art institutions. So, one reason I started this project was to think about how do we get art institutions to be more supportive of using that word community. Like, what does it actually mean? So when you ask an institution like, oh, let's connect to the community, many times they just send out an email. They've already got their kind of given community. There's not actually an outreach beyond what they've already had because it's difficult. And I think that's a huge problem with art institutions, is that they become lazy to seeing other groups of people. They ask people to come to their place. And I have to say, I give Darlena, I don't know if you guys remember Darlena from during the sewing days, but, and I'll show you a picture of her later, but she's actually started this quote for me, and I talk about it a lot, is, you know, think about all these students that go to the museums once a year, right? So they're said, okay, kids, come to our museum, see our work. We'll give you 1 day for the whole year that you get to see it, but don't touch anything. You're all in trouble. You know, it doesn't open up that feeling that kids would want to come back. It seems like a kind of unsafe space. And I think what we were trying to do, and this was just the beginning of me doing it in multiple different projects in the future, was figuring out a way to force institutions to try to figure out how to go out there. Like literally just go shake hands or talk to somebody, not email, not text, but actually go to the church, shake hands with people, say, could we come to your space versus you expecting them to come to your space. So anyway, this was the beginning of that. And so one of the groups actually that we worked with, which was so fantastic, was the Bibb and Tucker Sewing Co-op. And actually, here's a bunch of the women who we worked with. It just drives me bananas. I have so many different photographs, and so it was a little difficult for this slideshow because I was like, oh my God, how do I show all of them? Because we had so much fun. I mean, the Birmingham project, I will tell you guys, I've kept in contact with many of the people on this project still over this time. I mean, JD and Lisa came and stayed at my house in Brooklyn, New York. So like I do become connected with people during these projects. I enjoy working with people. I mean, I think a lot of times it's a misnomer that artists want to stay in their studio and never talk to anybody. I'm the opposite. This COVID element has been so frustrating and kind of emotionally draining, I have to admit, because I really work off of people. Like I love their energy. I like seeing where they open up their own creativity. I mean, this was one of the first, I'm going to show you this picture. This was our first sewing day, or one of them. It was our virtual sewing day. So I was back in Brooklyn. I couldn't fly in. And so AEIVA hosted a sewing day where a bunch of the Bibb and Tucker people came. And there's my picture. And Darlena just totally hammed it up. So that's Jared and Darlena. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I could not stop laughing. And we had a great time. And that was the other element. This was all about play. You know, I think a lot of times people think of contemporary art as being serious. And if you don't know, then you're not part of it. And, you know, you have to be a part of the club. And I hope to kind of break that. I feel like I break that by having the sewing days. You know, it's really intimidating to ask people to come and participate. And so I think it's really important for people to understand, like, okay, how do you reach beyond just this feeling over the fence of uncomfortability? A lot of times it's shaking hands with people. A lot of times it's like asking if they could bring their friend next time, or having enough events so that they understand, like, oh, it's a safe space where I can be creative, be vulnerable, and not be nervous about expressing myself. Also being an advocate for the project. I mean, I think that the one thing about Bibb and Tucker that was so great was that they became the artists for the project. I mean, they literally made the project. And so I talk about them as part of the story. Like, I say it as a we element, not as an Amanda Browder. I mean, whenever I'm speaking, I was like, oh, yes, we made it. Yes, we did this. I do it without even thinking, because it was a collective effort with everyone. Another thing too is people become friends with each other. Like, Lori and Nobi became friends after that. They were like talking about going on trips together, and it was all based on this kind of accidental creative experience, which I thought was so great. I love seeing Kyle hugging her friend too. That just makes me happy. Oh, and there's Adam. Adam is on the call here, just so you guys know. Wave if you're there. But he helped. So this was one of his first. I don't know if it's his first time sewing, but he later helped install the project, which was great. And you'll see some pictures of him as well. So yeah, play was a really big part of it. How do we have a good time? I mean, of course, the joke is it's a sweatshop. But the thing about sewing that people I don't think understand is that it is this meditative experience. And you can talk to people while you're doing it, just like when we're coloring, right? Like, we're all sitting together. We're all connecting just by being in the same space. It doesn't mean we have to talk, but we can see that we're together. And that's a different kind of energy than being alone and doing something. It's a different kind of creativity as well, because it's somewhat performative, but somewhat not. I mean, the act of sewing, you're not showing off that you're doing it, but there is a final product after everybody kind of does this amount of work. And I think during the sewing days, my job as an artist and a facilitator is also to celebrate that and to really say, okay, great job. Oh my gosh, you did a fantastic job to keep the group going. And then also what happens is those people end up supporting other people because they see it's okay to do that. I mean, again, participation in art is a very specific camp. I mean, I will tell you, in performance art, no way, do not pick me as the person for participation. Like, I'm going to be in the crowd and crouching down like this, be like, no, don't pick me, don't pick me. At the same time, if I do get picked, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'd make a fool of myself. This will be fun.
Well, and I remember specifically, we had a field trip of students from may have been Woodlawn, or it was one of the high schools in the area. And we grabbed them and said, we need a pin down this hallway that you guys are about to walk on. Why don't you help us? And they did, and they had so much fun. And then they even figured out a new way for us to gather up the fabric that we had not been doing at that point. And then we turned it into a race almost.
Yeah, it was kind of like a downward dog experience. So you do the downward dog, you put your hands on the fabric, and then you push. But this is like a 120-foot long section, so it was like two people were racing down these little strips of fabric.
Hey, Amanda.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we go back even further?
Yeah.
How did the whole project come about? How was it even discussed? Who pitched it to you?
She told us about that. She already told us about that.
Okay.
Well, actually, I can tell you, the pitching was really me pitching to them. I mean, Lauren Lake, who was the director at that time, she was the one that first contacted me. And then what happened was trying to figure out, each project I do a site visit. Because one thing that's really important about each of these projects is like the final photograph. You know, that's the thing that's living on forever. Some of the pieces that I've done in the past have been up for 2 days, and that's it. But the photograph is the thing that lasts the longest. So whenever I'm putting up a project, I really take in consideration about the space, the location, the architecture, how people are walking through the space, how they're going to use their cell phones to take photographs. And it's very specific, it's the cell phones, because that's how we're photographing things these days. I mean, when I was younger, it was cameras. Like, we had digital cameras, you'd walk around and the image was this, now it's this. And so as an artist, you have to be really visual or aware of the fact of how people are retaining imagery and then saving it for a memory in some way. I mean, one thing that I don't think I did on this project, but a different one, I screenshot all the Instagram posts from Spectral Locus, like every hashtag, anybody post anything, and then I made a physical book with those screenshots, kind of taking it from digital back to visual, or literal, because I think it's how we kind of retain information. Books are a little bit different. I'm not saying they're better or worse. It's just a different kind of source of information that you're kind of taking in. But definitely the project first, we were looking actually for everybody that lives in Birmingham. You know that wall that's like the brick wall? That was actually the first location we were talking about working on. And then honestly, it's been a while. I can't remember why, but I was like, let's do the big buildings. It felt too small to do it on that brick like side. I was just like, it seems so just to the side. So I actually have a few designs that were built on that. And then I just changed it up. I was like, no, let's go bigger. So that from ground to Oculus, that was like the top of the Oculus, which is that peak on the top. That's about 120 feet, somewhere around there. Oh yeah, and then so let's just talk specifically about outreach. So this is Doug, by the way. Most people know Doug from Birmingham, and as you guys know, he's an unbelievable dyer art. I mean, he's such a great artist, right? We became very close friends. He took me to every secondhand store. I have the coolest outfits because of him.
Onesie.
Yes, that's right.
My favorite onesie.
So Doug, which was so great, he extended his kind of creative practice, which I thought was so great, was showing people how to do hand dyeing with indigo dyeing. So a group of people got together, students, went out to the lawn, made their own tie-dyed blue fabric, and then we sewed that together into the actual project so that it was this very specific group of people and the fabric that they built. And I liked that because then beyond just like the story of each element, thinking about each fabric donation as being a representation of the community, it was a collection of people who were building their own fabric and saying, okay, this is our memory. This is our moment in time of how we got together and built this creative thing. And I also like that the creative process was the thing. Like there was this testing. A lot of people had probably never done that before. And so the process of showing creative ingenuity or practice was beautiful. It ended up being this gorgeous element that went to the project that was on Alice Stevens. I can probably pull it up. I don't know if I have it right away here.
I do remember I was either walking into work or I was walking into the building, and there was a couple of people standing on the sidewalk, and I vaguely recognized them. Yeah. And they were pointing out, and they were like, yeah, I donated that piece of fabric right there. And so it almost became a game where some people would like go and point out, hey, I donated that. Or, those pieces right there. Wasn't there one piece that someone had written a message on?
I'm sure a lot of people do. And I try to ask people not to do that just because it becomes then a thing people look for as a dot on the project. And I do want people to back up and see the pixelation as one object and then, be able to hone in when they feel like it and see the separation. So like in this image, you'll see the stripes, some are kind of solid, like that blue piece is very solid and the speckled black and white, but then the pink all the way on the left has more of a quilt-like kind of element. But if you squint, they start to blend. You start losing the interest in trying to see each piece as a separate entity. If it's your fabric, 100%. Like I think the more kind of quilty elements, you start really trying to find the piece. I mean, also just if you sewed that section, beyond just being able to donate it, it also becomes this work element of like, oh my gosh, I sewed that orange section. It was so difficult. But there's pride in that too, because you can point it out later and say, I did that, like that enormous thing that covers a building. I mean, I think scale-wise, why I love working so large is it just kind of encourages people to remember that things can be bigger than them. They can build something as big as a building, and it doesn't have to be intimidating. I mean, I do not know how to build a building. That sounds very intimidating. But just kind of taking this leap of faith that this fabric mathematically, I mean, you can see in my designs, like I had a couple of pictures up, I do a lot of measurements when it comes to each project and kind of setting up how it's made. I was a math major for a couple of years in undergrad and slowly shifted to art because I just love doing that. But that mathematic brain is still within me. A squared, B squared, C squared is one of my favorite equations that I use very regularly. Even though like in the computer program to the bottom right is SketchUp, like Google SketchUp. Highly recommend the program if you are interested in 3D modeling. But I've used that just to kind of get basic measurements, but I always kind of do it on my own just in case. I feel like it's really important to triple check everything. The computers can do one thing and they can figure it out, but it's always better just in case to just do it by hand. It's a good double check. So yeah, I think Oh, can I just tell a side funny story? Well, it's a tough story. So, in this picture, you'll see my hand. I'm wearing this like sock right here. So this was a little embarrassing. So I'm a new artist. This project was one of the first major pieces I did, like large scale and out of town. Like it was a big deal that I came to work with you guys. And right before I came to visit, I was cooking quinoa and poof, my wrist burned off the whole section of skin. It was very painful and gross and horrible. And it was like 3rd-degree burn. It was not a positive thing. But unfortunately, because it was right at my wrist, I didn't want to make an uncomfortable, shaking someone's hand and be like, don't worry about this big white bandage on my wrist. So I wore this black sock just to kind of like pretend I was cool and came from Brooklyn and but the whole time I was covering up this major bandage, and it took about, I still have the scar. It's like, this big. It's not a small thing that happened to me, but I see it every time now in these pictures, and I'm like, oh, that was an intense moment in medical history when it comes to these projects. But I healed, which is good. But yeah, I'm happy that ended. Anyway,
we had a quick question. First off, it was totally cool style. But do you happen to know how much the fabric ended up weighing?
Oh, yeah. So that project, let me think about this. I would say, well, okay. Okay. I would guess that one was only maybe like 250, 300 pounds. It's actually not that much. Like people really think because it's so large that it weighs a ton. But fabric, when we're sewing it, it's all thin cotton, right? So it's not brick or wood. So a piece like that, you would see dropping from the center of AEIVA, that probably only weighs like 30 to 40 pounds. Like it doesn't actually weigh that much. And when you roll it up, that piece, the triangle, that would fit into a duffel bag easily, like a very small duffel bag. So the fabric works, they are just the facade of things. It's a flat planar form. It's very, very thin this way, but really large this way. So visually, it can be very impeding, but it's not that heavy. The heaviest piece I ever did was the one where I covered 6 buildings, and that was the one in Grand Rapids I'll show you pictures of. And that one weighed about 800 pounds probably. We actually had to lift that one on the roof, we had to have an actual wrecking ball crane bring that one up. So that was a heavy one. But I save everything, so this piece still exists. So, yeah.
So off of that, I can interject that when we took it down, I was the one that had to pack it up.
Sorry.
No, it was fun. And actually, my student workers loved helping me with that. We ended up shipping it to. That was the first time ever I had to do freight shipping.
Yeah.
Because the only size box it would get into is a 36 by 36 by 36,
yeah.
And that was just slightly too big for anyone else. And so I think we shipped all of it from both Alice Stevens Center and us, all of it to you in 5.
And I still have it.
Boxes.
Yeah. And nice. I still have that whole piece. Yeah, nothing gets cut up. Each piece is saved because I think long term. Like yes, I'm an artist. At that time, I was definitely very emerging. I was still emerging, but it was still a new process of like, what do I do with these things? But so many people put so much work into it. All the fabric donations were infused with memories and history and stories. I couldn't cut it up, and also it was site specific to Birmingham. So working with people that were there, it didn't make sense to put it into a project somewhere else. It wouldn't have the same resonance that this project really had. I think during the party, we had such a celebration of us getting together and celebrating that we did this as a unit. It was such a weird thing to do that it was even better in some way. I feel like I was really sad to leave town. That was the hardest part about the whole project, was to leave, say goodbye. Because I missed it. It's really nice. And actually, even when I see it in the studio, I'm like, hi, friends, friends of fabric. just like Jared here. Well, no, Jacob here. Sorry, not Jared. I was thinking of Jared Ragland, the photographer.
Who was taking the pictures.
You're taking the pictures. Yeah, exactly. What were you going to say?
So it doesn't get, that was one of the questions I had for you was, from each project, not just ours, does any of the fabric travel over? Because I know we had one color we were a little shy on, so you did have some fabric that you had to bring in for that one.
Probably. Sometimes I do that. I don't do it as often as I try to keep it as like solid as possible, but I'll tell you the colors we don't get donations are orange, yellow, and like really nice purple. Baby blue, most common color that's donated. Lots and lots of that. And that's already out in the sky. You know, like if you look at this piece on my shirt, the sky up here is the same color. So having a baby blue, it just kind of continues on. I'm trying to find more bold, saturated, you know, what is it, primary colors, if anything. But I really try to keep to, you know, and this talks about vulnerability. Let's talk about that. So one thing that's hard about my projects is that they have many mysteries while you're working on it. In public art, a lot of times you'll write a grant, you'll propose a project, and if the project is accepted, they expect it to be made like the design that was pre-built. I mean, a lot of times you can change it here and there. It's made by committee, but usually you have kind of a major concept. You know who's going to build it, how they're going to do it, the budget's going to work, and it's done. But with my work, there's a lot of question marks. Like, are we going to have enough people that come and sew? Are we going to have enough fabric? Will the location be okay of us putting it up? Sometimes we start a project and we start in one building and it has to be shifted somewhere else. And so it's more of like, you can't put a calendar fully on the project. I kind of have to guess up until like 2 weeks before the install what's happening. And that frustrates institutions, and I understand. And there's this video that was made with the Grand Rapids project, this videographer. So if anybody feels like watching me make a piece, you can go on YouTube, and I could probably find the thing, but I won't do it now because it's my screen. But they have, it's like a reality show about me making the project, which is a little embarrassing. I can't remember what it's called. But you can, the first episode, it's like an 8-webisode episode thing, is like the institution being like, can you just tell us when this is done? And we're like, are we halfway? And I was like, I can't tell you. I don't know. It's medium. So I was like, I don't know. I'm sorry. And they're just like, oh, they're like, we support Amanda, but she's terrifying us. And I was like, you'll get over it. It'll be fine. Don't worry. Just trust me, which is hard to do. I get it. There's a lot of stuff going in, but the project will always get finished. Like, that's the main thing. I always tell people, I'm like, don't worry. It will get done. But, and it did, which was great. Anyway, this project, I can't remember if these were the high school students. I think these were the high school students that came to visit. I just remember June was friends with everybody. And June forced everybody to come outside and do this with their arms. I was like, it's okay, you don't have to do that. And she was like, no, everybody. And June's right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but she's right here. She was like, she's a very, I hope this is not mean to my Southern friends, but she had a very Southern side where she was like smiling, but then kind of mean.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I loved her. She moved out of town, I think. Anyway, but this was a cool photo. All right. A sewing, let's see. What else can I talk about? I kind of want to show you. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you how your process has changed a little bit during this time of COVID.
Yeah.
Because I know you had said, I love that picture.
I know. Sorry, I didn't know where it was. I threw it in there because I know you guys wanted me to have it.
We were all asking about it.
I know. So just so everybody knows, thanks, Anna. So this piece, this was a moment. I mean, this happens all the time. You'll be doing something and then you kind of look up. Jared Ragland, we give him credit. He's the one that saw this first. He and I were across the street. We were shooting the piece, and we looked up and he was like, whoa, look at that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And the bus stopped at the stoplight every 20 minutes, and it would link up just at that exact moment where the back of the bus would hit that. So it was kind of awesome. It happened every day, all day. And it was just the happy accident of life living around this project. I mean, I think, when you're secluded to museums, you really don't, you kind of forget the outside world. Like you're kind of focused in on this portal. And my work, I attempt to kind of get people to understand that art is part of our everyday life. I mean, beyond the sewing days, trying to encourage people that contemporary art is not a scary thing, that it can be enveloped in our everyday practice. Also, just like working on the outside of buildings, so you can go there in the middle of the night, you can go there at 4 a.m, and it's vulnerable. People could cut it up, they could spray paint it, but you're trusting people, you're giving people the benefit of the doubt. And that trust encourages people to come back to the museum because they feel appreciated versus excluded, which is very much a thing that museums a lot of times do. I'm sure AEIVA doesn't do that. But it's kind of it's inherent, it's part of the process. And so I really hope during these like public sewing days, as much as I can, try to encourage people to talk to their friends about the project. Them as advocates, like participants as advocates, really push the contemporary art or art practice or visual learning as something important, and that we need it, and it shouldn't be eliminated from schools and different places like museums alone. I'm talking to people now because of COVID who are being fired, like so many different art professors. My friends all used to work at MoMA, and they just fired all the art education people, and they will not hire them back. And it's devastating what's happening, I have to admit. I know we can talk about that for a second, but this is the Vulcan, just so everybody from out of town. This is the sculpture that's actually not that small. It was just a linked up, scale shift confusion. That the Vulcan's like on top of a mountain, and it just happened to be behind the Oculus. So that's why I took that photo.
Also, I went to look it up, and it's no longer up, but there for a while, Google Earth the Google cameras came through, and so when you looked up our address, for the longest, it was pictures of this that showed up on Google Earth. But no, I just checked, they redid it in March of 2019. So
that's pretty cool, though. That's awesome. It was up for a while. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, and here's the indigo stripe, just so you guys can see close up, which was amazing. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this was like when Instagram was fun to put things. I just liked how it changed the building. I mean, this picture makes me so happy because you see the dappling of the clouds, and then the angle of that weird box Oculus thing on top. And this was later, too, because I don't know if you guys remember the history, but we put the piece up, and then this massive storm came along and actually shredded like a good.
It was me and your mother there when it happened.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well,
I was in the back of a truck with Jared and Doug, and we were going over the bridge. And actually, Jared took this amazing portrait of me sitting in the back of the truck. I was like, I'm Alabama. I'm hanging out in the back of a truck, riding in the open, right? And all of a sudden, I look from the distance, and I see this cloud, massive, dark cloud coming over and I was like, oh, that's bad. And it just destroyed a couple of sections. So, it happens. I mean, these pieces are vulnerable. They're not permanent. And I think a lot of times people forget the fact that the sewing days are so important. They're 80% of the project. Just the piece on its end is just a little bit. I mean, the photographs are the things that we're looking at more than the actual piece. So even if we had it up for a day, if all those photographs were put together, that becomes like a whole chunk of what the project is all about. I mean, that decentralization of the art object, how can you sell it when it's all over the place? Anybody can photograph it. Anybody can participate. It's open to the public. It's like an open source art object. People can take images like this and put filters on them and turn it into whatever. I like that it's kind of out in the world, and we can talk about it a little bit more. Here's the Bibb and Tucker women who I just adore. Who I know I'm like, I'll have to call Lilith and be like, Lilith, you were on there so many different times. And I actually text, who else did I text? But yeah, all these women were amazing. Who is it? Lilith?
And Lilith is up there in the front.
Yeah, so if we're going from right to left, I have Lilith, June, Lori, Nobi, myself, Darlena, Michelle, I'm forgetting her name. Oh, I'm friends with her on Facebook, and then Ryan, and they all were just such fantastic. And that's not everybody. This is just like the group of women that were there, part of Bibb and Tucker Sewing Co-op, and they made each other quilts. They made me quilts. I mean, it was such a loving community. I'm still in contact with everybody. So it makes it very, here's the quilts. Hey, there we go. So one thing also that I'll say.
I was going to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But I've got to give a big old shout out from Birmingham to Bibb and Tucker. Mm-hmm. COVID-19, Those women are kicking butt. I would use another word, but I'm trying to be PC. Those women are taking care of our community. They have chosen to step up, make masks for all of our healthcare workers, and they're a phenomenal group, and
It's true.
they love you, you love them, we love them. So I just had to say, yay, Bib and Tucker, because they're
If anybody's in Birmingham, feel free to go by their space. We did a project, so that quilt in the bottom right, I returned back to Birmingham because I missed everybody. And I used the offcuts for us to make 3 different quilts. So I didn't know how to quilt. I do not know how to quilt. So they taught me how to do some quilting projects. We made one crazy one, which was mine. And then 2 of them, one went to UAB and then one went to them to raffle off for rent money as well as scholarship fund for the students. So just like thinking about what happens after the project, like how does it continue on? So the one on the bed that I wanted to talk about is actually from Ryan. She was inspired by the project and made that quilt based on the actual project. So I just wanted to kind of talk about how the dissemination of the project can live on beyond just the process of making something. It can also create this inspiration, like kind of swirl that goes out where people are like, oh, I could make something like this. I mean, Darlena, I'm still waiting for her to cover her house because she was like, I'm going to cover my house. I'm inspired. We're going to do it. I was like, yes, call me. I'll come help you. Like I'm dying for one person from these projects to cover their building in some way. But I just wanted to show this, just see how the dissemination of creativity can kind of continue on. And this was us at the second group of us sewing together and making this is my crazy quilt that I made because again, I don't know how to quilt. So I was like, listen, I know the traditional ones are there, but I need to do the Amanda Browder version. So it's going to be way too tall and completely out of control. So this was my system of quilting. It's not fully finished. It's just a top, but I love the color combination. And it was literal sections that we trimmed. So a lot of the pieces weren't altered when I sewed them together. It wasn't cut to fit the piece. I just it was already kind of pre-torn for that section. It was a trimming and we just included it in the project. So this is actually where you can pick up the masks if you're looking for them. They have boxes right outside right here and they're making tons. Lisa works in healthcare and they provided you guys for like 200 plus masks for your community. So I think that's really great.
And we are running about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
So
can I just like blow through some pictures and
yes,
then if
please.
you want to ask questions and then I'll just show pictures like crazy?
Yeah. So does anyone have some questions that they want to ask? Feel free to unmute if you have a question. And I know.
Talk too.
Okay.
So, yeah, go for it.
So why don't you tell us what
you were like,
what are your upcoming installations? What are you working on right now?
Yeah. So primarily, let's see, what am I working now? Oh, so let's talk about COVID, how that changed.
You guys want to have burgers soon?
Oh, someone's chatting about burgers. That sounds delicious. Who's that person? Can we eat some of that? The project that I'm doing right now that's coming up, Arts Westchester, I was working on that while this COVID practice happened. And the intense part is that a good friend of mine who had been tested 2 days after coming to a sewing day showed up. And so it was a bit of a devastating moment just because my sewing days, I was literally 2 months I was 2 months away before doing the install. We were supposed to put this piece up May 10th. So everything went to screeching halt because of the project, which was pretty devastating. And so we put that piece on hold. But one really cool thing is that I was just talking to Erin, who's the folklore director here. We're creating a podcast because we did audio interviews with a lot of the volunteers who came and sewed, just talking about how they're connected to fabric and connected to New York City. The textile design, textile history through New York is so deep. And so, it's really exciting. But the other ones that are coming up, I've also got a project in what am I working? The one in Milwaukee. And that one this is the first time I've ever not done a public sewing days. So we're trying something different, which is a little frustrating, but it is a pandemic project where they're shipping me the fabric that they had already gotten donated. and I'm building the piece in the studio separately from everybody. And actually, Anna, who is in the list, say hi, Anna. Hello. She is helping sew the project with me, but separately at her own home. So I have a collection of 4 different women that I'm working with, and I pin it at home, and then they sew it, and then we pick it up from each other 6 feet away, and keep masks and everything, and clarify, and do that kind of thing. So that's at the end of June. So right now I'm just in the process of piecing it together, and I'm going to probably use my studio to do some big sections of it as well before I drive there. Then I'm doing a project in St. Cloud, Illinois, and then the big one's going to be in Bruges in Europe. So I've gone there already, and I'm doing a project there, and it looks like I might be covering a canal. So that's going to be a big project, not small. Let's just say that.
And I had been talking to one of my coworkers yesterday about this. Do you tend to gravitate towards projects in smaller or medium-sized towns versus larger cities, or is it a mix? Do you see any difference in community participation because of that?
Not necessarily. That's an interesting question, though. I mean, I would say the larger projects bring more people. Like the one that was previous to this one, the Kaleidoscopic in Grand Rapids, where we covered 6 buildings. That we had over 1,000 people come and volunteer, and so that was a massive number. But Grand Rapids, it's big, but maybe 100,000. This one was in Las Vegas, and we might have had like 200 people. But it was a smaller piece and related to the university. And so each one's a little bit different. I mean, like the Chromatopia, this one, we worked with grade school kids. So we were in their space or in their gymnasium doing the sewing day. I love this picture because I caught this woman saying sewing day. And it looks like she's like, ah! Celebration. I was like, oh my God, I love it. I love local news, by the way. It's one of my favorite things to do. Any chance that I can get on local news with people to celebrate the people who are showing up. Like at the one up in Arts Westchester, we were actually on the tri-state area live news. Like I was in cabs with all the people. They showed up at 4 a.m. 25 volunteers showed up at 4 a.m. to come on, be on live TV. I mean, it's that sense of pride and celebration and just excitement to participate that I think is so cool. I mean, these kids, we had so much fun together. Like, it wasn't about making sure they made the grade or, that they all had stories to tell. I mean, this ended up becoming the cover of their yearbook. It felt very infused in, each project is infused in the community on their level. Like, it's not asking them to curtail to the museum or to have that experience. It really says, how do you want to relate with this project? Like, I have an idea, but maybe we do something different. So, yeah.
I love this video.
Yeah, this one's sped up. So this one was in the power plant in Beloit, Wisconsin. And this was a power plant that had just been decommissioned. But when you went to the power plant, I uploaded a video so you could see it. People can stand there, and the wall of fabric could completely envelop you. And if you think about a facade of a building like falling on top of you, that's what it felt like. But then it weighed nothing. You can see as it goes over people's heads, like it weighs like 2 pounds. Like, so the fear, it's this awkward sense of, and then you're like, oh, it's fine. I'm stronger than this. So which kind of parallels the experience of making art. Like, it's scary to jump in, and I mean, coloring, that stresses me out because I'm like, what am I going to put in what box and fill it? I just need to start smearing things and be like, okay, now I can do this. Yes. Rules make me nervous. But yeah, here's some delightful pictures. I'm really excited actually to do the project in Milwaukee because I get to go back to Wisconsin. Already people from Milwaukee or Wisconsin have called me just to check up on me, see how I'm doing. And I'm like, guess what? I'm coming. We're going to hang out again. And they're like, perfect. We'll bring fabric. And I was like, no, stay away. It's really confusing. So the COVID experience has really just cut all of my public sewing days. The project for Milwaukee will actually be up for 2 weeks, but nobody will actually there was supposed to be a big street festival and art festival, and all of that has been canceled, unfortunately. My piece is going to go up. So people will be able to drive past and check it out, which is great. They'll be able to look for their fabric, which is really awesome. So, yeah.
Well, does anyone have any last minute questions? You're welcome to unmute yourselves.
And no worries if you don't either. I can just talk your ears off as well.
Hey,
I'll
JD,
just
do you want to unmute yourself? You want to unmute yourself. You got 1 minute. Yeah. Come on, hurry.
Make see up there. This is at
I can
the
see everyone's coloring pages.
Oh, this is such an awesome moment too. Look at these guys. A lot of times people like to photograph themselves in front of my projects, and at the Dumbo Arts Festival, this one was one of the best. This guy on the left was like a famous kung fu master person, and he did this whole formation for video, and his daughter and I became friends after this. And then the guy on the right, he was like, do you mind taking my photo? He was all shy, and then bam, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the most amazing jump. that was, yeah, that project was lots of jumping. Everybody wanted to look like they were falling from the waterfall, which was great.
It looks like Claudia has a question.
Oh yeah, Claudia, what's up?
I have a completely self-serving question. What other projects are you working on?
Oh my God, Claudia, you're killing me. Yes, of course. So Claudia and I, hi Claudia, we grew up in Montana together, and she is an amazing performer, activist who lives in San Francisco, and she put out a call a year ago. I think it's around a little over a year ago, saying like, what the heck is going on? We have all of these, so many things were happening at that time. Oh gosh, Claudia, you're going to kill me. I'm bad at pitching. Anyway, we started the Justice Quilt, and the Justice Quilt is a project that what we're trying to do, and it's actually pretty good thinking about COVID, is asking people to come together. We're going to be sewing a quilt that says the word justice, and we're going to be putting it on the outside of different buildings. Specifically, we're working towards the election to encourage people to come together and think about social injustice and thinking about how our collective unit can help people around the United States. Yeah, how did I do, Claudia? Do you want to talk a little bit more? Because you're good at the conversation. I'm uncomfortable and nervous.
You're doing a brilliant and beautiful job. Ultimately, we have sewing and story circles happening in every state across the nation. Of course, this COVID-19 crisis has halted that project, sewing circles, as well, but the digital story circles are continuing, and we're very excited about creating a gigantic and beautiful, impactful visual art object that the entire community can gather around and do a performance of justice around. And it's just such a deep pleasure collaborating with you on that. Thank you so much for giving it a shout out.
No, of course. And I'm really glad you said something, because I think that my collaboration with the Justice Quilt, what's interesting is we're seeing two parallel artists support their strong suits and what they do, but then still show off each of our strengths. So I'm really excited to build this large scale thing. I have this weird ability to cover buildings with fabric, and I'm excited to work with Claudia and just thinking about, if anybody has a chance to come to one of our story circles, I can't recommend it enough. It is so powerful and so invigorating. I mean, as Zoom has come about to be something very common at this moment, every time I've been to a story circle, it's unbelievable. So please look it up.
Be a little bit hard for me by myself with the luggage and the dog.
So if Amanda, if you will unshare your screen.
Oh yeah, sure.
And if everybody will, once we do the, there we go. Great.
Learning.
I will switch us back to gallery view, and then if you guys want to share, turn on your videos, and we can all share each other how far we got. And I did. I thought I would, which is awesome.
Oh my God.
So amazing.
That was so good.
These are awesome.
I'm like, whoa, I don't know where I am in the thing, so I'll just point everywhere.
Yeah.
Can I screenshot? I got a screenshot. Hold them up. Hold them up, everybody. I'm going to screenshot this on my computer. Is that okay?
That is perfectly fine.
1, 2, 3, go. Okay, thanks, guys. You're amazing.
Hey, if you guys want to take a picture and share it on Instagram, we will, or on Facebook, and tag us. So our Instagram handle is AEIVA UAB, so AEIVA UAB, and then also
I'll put it in the chat.
Yes, and on Facebook it's UAB Abram Engel Institute for Visual Arts. It's AEIVA UAB, AEIVA UAB. Yeah, there we go. Excellent. Thank you, Dana. And then UAB's Abrams Engel Institute for the Visual Arts. But if you just type AEIVA in AEIVA in Facebook, you'll find it there. So please share them. Tag us. We'll be sure to share them on our social media, and it has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, Amanda. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. We could have kept going for another hour.
I talked a lot.
I loved it. And if you guys loved it, please come back next week. We'll be talking with Marilee Chalice, who is one of the professors at UAB right now, as well as one of the instructors, and is a local artist here too. So join us again for another night, and I hope to see you all back. And thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Thanks,
everybody. I'm so glad to see you guys, especially the Birmingham people. Oh my gosh, I miss you all so much. Come visit me in New York City. You can stay in my house. I have a small place, but you know.
I will definitely be hitting you up next time I'm there.
Sounds great. I hope so.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.
Great to see you.